Hello, Brobs. We're starting a new narrative poem by Jeffers. This one is obviously the title poem, To Such Counsels You Gave to Me. I think this is starting towards his later years. Could be wrong, though. 1937? No, that was when he was 37, 50. So this is his basically middle years. He wrote until he died. But I think, yeah, this is probably his middle years. This is a 62-page poem. There's some good ones in here, like The Answer. Oh, Lovely Rock's a real good one. But I'm going to stick with the narrative poem. And let's read what this says. And what wool ye leave to your own mother, dear? My dear son, now tell me, oh, the curse of hell fray me, sail ye ere, mither, the curse of, does it say bell or hell? The curse of hell fray me, say ye here, sick counsels ye gave to me, oh. All right, that's great. I know I butchered that, but such is life. Such counsels you gave to me, part 1. A young man carrying a battered straw suitcase climbed slowly the wavering cattle track from an offset gorge of Malpaso Canyon and across the hill towards Howren's place. He staggered from time to time with illness or extreme fatigue. Behind him, in the magnificent afterglow of November sundown, the two brightest of planets hung close together. Like brilliant condensations of the amber light above the crimson, the sky overhead was still blue and pale. The young man was perfectly alone on the white-grassed hills under the sky. He was like a hardly noticed thought of unhappiness passing through a great serene mind, but when he approached the fall of the hill toward Howren's, he saw apparently a person on the verge, outlined against the darkening commissure of the farther hills, intently gazing into the valley. The young man's tired and dull mind, bred in these hills, taught in the city, reverted easily toward his dead childhood. He thought it might be one of the watchers who are often seen in this length of coast range, forms that look human to human eyes, but certainly are not human. They come from behind ridges and watch. But when he approached it, he recognized the shabby clothes and pale hair and even the averted forehead and concave line from the eye to the jaw, so that he was not surprised when the figure turning toward him in the quiet twilight showed his own face. Then it melted and merged into the shadows beyond it. The young man thought heavily that in his state of mind and body hallucination was not surprising. He went and stood for a time just where the figure had stood in the same attitude, staring down at the farmhouse roof. He thought that 20 years ago, but no doubt a little later at night, his mother, then a young girl of 16 or 17, slender and wistful of body, and the strong, coarse man his father had lain in a bed under that roof, welding their naked bodies together. And I that stand here with all my inflamed hopes, work, wretchedness, final disaster, am the result. Go to it, dear parents. He watched undazzled, as if the farmhouse roof and the 20 years had become glass. I have something here in my pocket to undo all your bedwork. He imagined the terrible life race of the myriad half cells of one. Ejaculation racing up the wet uterine darkness to find one bride. One finds her and enjoys her and has a future, poor fool. The others die frustrate. Like competition in the world outside, for one that wins, thousands of others wither in the wet darkness. Like competition in the world. But if the poor passionate tadpole with all his genes in him could have foreseen what prize he was winning, he'd have sculled the dark stream less eagerly. The boy went down through the pale twilight. They had lighted lamps in the house. He stood and looked in a window, hoping to escape meeting his father tonight, or any man, in this dejection. He saw Grace Gomez pass silhouetted against the lamplight with a pile of plates to set the table. She propped them on her big belly. Her hands held them, her belly carried them. He heard noises from the hill behind and stumbled away from the house to stand behind an oak bush and watch them pass, horse, man, and dogs, and the pig's carcass. His father had shot one of the great wild pigs and was sledding it home from the hill, driving to the heavy timbered farm gate, built like a gallows where he used to hang them for flaying and quartering. But first he went to the house to fetch a helper and a lantern. When he returned, and the two far dark figures in their aura of reddish lantern light at the gallows foot, the boy took up the suitcase and went indoors. His mother stared at him as if she were seeing a spirit. "Oh, Howard, what's happened?" "Nothing. I'm sick." "Well, I've cracked up. I can't go on unless he'll help." The pupils of her eyes dilated. She said with no change of countenance, but the momentary waxing and waning of the pupils, which the boy saw because her face was toward the lamp and his eyes knew from the twilight. She said, "How did you come?" "Begged rides." "I know he won't. I'm prepared." His sister came in, hearing their voices. "Howard!" "Hello, France," the mother said. "What do you mean, prepared?" "Oh, prepared for it." "I can't talk to him tonight, mother. I am half dead. Let me lie down." She brought him supper to his bedside, and he was very hungry, but the odor of food turned his face white. He said he had failed a midterm examination. He knew the subject all right. His mind went blank, and splinters like a broken mirror. He worked at night in a restaurant. Why, food nauseates me, and janitor work in the biology lab. Studies are stiffer this year. Well, cracked up, you know, mother. I've got to be first or nothing. There's a young Jew. I just nosed by him last year, but the class idiot can beat me now. I can't, concentrate. If his father would lend him $30 a month, he could go on. Mostly nerves, losing sleep. They'd given him tuberculin test at the infirmary, positive reaction. That was nothing important. Only he could not go on unhelped. She sat by the bed, kissing his hand, and said, "Mine was like that." He said, "It would take more money through medical." "What, mother, your hand?" "Mine," she answered. "That time after France was born. What you said, bright splinters around a blank." "Oh," he answered quietly, to encourage me. "Don't worry. I'm quite sane, only drained. I want you to rest this year," she answered. "Start fresh from next year. I might be raving by then and shipped off to the booby hatch for a real rest, like you." She said, you were 3 years old. When I came home, you were 5 years old. If you hadn't come home, I'd have grown up like him. Exactly the IQ of a wild hog. Whatever happens, mother, I'm grateful to you." He sighed and turned from her face and the lamp. She extinguished it and turned in the darkness, bending over the bed to kiss his cheek. He said, "Mother, if you still sleep with him, be very careful. You are still young. It would be cruel to breed another like me." He spoke clearly, but without inflection. He was perhaps already asleep, but she stood back from the bed without kissing him. She listened to the breathing of his exhaustion, the gentle moan at the start of each expiration, whispered again, "Good night, dearest," and tiptoed out. Sleep deepened over him like heavy ocean. More like coma than sleep, his mind made no appreciable dreams, but crawling blindly about his body like a numb spider on its web of nerves. Here it shook a filament. There a dark ganglion faintly glowed for a moment and returned to darkness. A pinpoint nexus of brain cells grew phosphorescent and faded and faintly glowed again, little superfluities of meaningless chemistry. Beside the tidal glowing and paling, and the traffic light rhythms of nerves that govern breathing and heartbeat, arteries and viscera. While outside the boy's body and the house, Orion swam slowly. From the hills, the southeastern sky, Procyon came up. Dry east began to move across the hills. It creaked in the house and made strange flappings in the old roof. Sirius came up to crackle in heaven like a blue diamond. Little spurts of color about that time a small constellation of nerve cells began to glow in the sleeper's brain, and his mind dreamed an image, a vaporous distortion rather, as if he saw a small cloud like a frog, and it had frog skin at the lighted spot. This faded quickly. The exhausted elements of life fought against consciousness, even the fractional consciousness that makes a dream. Some gland poured opium into the blood. Sirius flamed higher. The Pleiades went over westward. The nerve cells recharged their exhausted batteries. A whisper went through gray starlight that the earth was turning over toward morning. Then strands and galaxies of nerve cells flickered in the brain, and thin swords through the cord and body, and the boy dreamed that he and others in the laboratory were nailing a dog to wings, driving sharp horseshoe nails between the pads of the forepaws into the shafts of the wing frames. The dog vanished from the dream, the dreamer himself flying wide over the city. Crucified to wings, one of the spikes tore out through his palm, and he pitched down, falling along the facade of a public building. He saw the rainbow-haloed flame of a candle through sleep-wet eyelashes, his mother in her nightdress standing, holding it. What? Oh, screaming so, she answered. He saw the candle tremble in her hand. Why was she terrified? They stared at each other through the jigging candlelight, both faces haggard from the deeps of sleep. Their intimate resemblances appeared more clearly. The narrowed oval outline, the droop of the mouth corners, the high-bridged bone of the nose, the blonde pallor in the hollow cheeks. They were two coins of one minting. Howard, dearest, are you all right? He said, will you let me alone? At night, at least. You were crying the way a dog, one of those falling dreams, he answered. Wings over Spain or something. Go back to bed. She looked all about the room. What did you mean when you said prepared? I haven't the faintest idea what you're talking about, Mother. Prepared? She said, I'd kill myself if anything should happen to you. What? Nothing will happen. I am not well and had a nightmare, that's all. Your teeth are clacking with cold. Go back and warm yourself. Besides your husband, he said, and looked curiously at her eyes. Would the pupils widen? But could she neither blue iris nor black center in the shaking candlelight, only long, obscure shadows? She said, you don't need to be cruel to me. My life's not joyful. Our minds are pits, Mother, depth under depth and level under level. What color are France's eyes? What, dear? They are brown, aren't they? She said. What do you mean? Nothing whatever, it occurred to me. He noticed that her shivering stopped. The candle flame burned steady in the quiet air. He had never so much admired her. Brown like my father's, she said. What of it? Nothing, he smiled in himself, thinking about the scrap of Mendelian theory picked up in high school. Blue eyes, recessive, brown, dominant. Therefore, blue-eyed parents cannot produce a dark-eyed child. The dark-eyed producing element is lacking in them. If it were present in either, that one would be dark-eyed, for dark eyes are dominant. At first it had frightened him, and he refused to believe it. After he accepted it, he avoided his mother for a time, and from this time forward found feverish interest in all the sciences of life. To know, to understand, to discover the springs of life. There his hungry mind found it spent and direction, and so continued. These waves of passion had gone over him in wild secrecy and loneliness, forming his life, but now that he grew adjusted to knowledge, the secret connivance at his mother's fortuitous or passionate adultery made her more real and dear. Not merely a mother, a living woman with her own loves and lawlessness. He said, good night, Mother. I'll promise not to dream anymore, at least out loud. Good night, dearest. After she was gone, he got up and went stealthily about the darkness to find his coat on the chair back. He folded it and laid it under his pillow. He had a precious thing in the pocket. In the morning, he was still tired and ill, but having the KCN snitched from the laboratory, the open sesame of sudden death in his pocket, one could run through the rigmarole. And that's the end of that section. Interesting. Tells you not much of what's coming, and I don't remember the book at all, to be frank with you. All right, that's all. Goodbye, bros. Goodbye. Goodbye.